So you said that you discovered that your passion was for medicine very, very late on in your university, like applying for university and end of A levels, that kind of stuff. So, so why did you go into? Because you studied biomedical science first. So why biomedical science? And what is the difference between a biomedical science degree and a degree in medicine?
So when I applied for biomedical science, I actually still wanted to apply for medicine. So like I said earlier, the realization for me wanting to do medicine came in quite late. It was actually a bit too late. So my grades weren't good enough. I had no volunteering experience. Um, and I didn't really know about the entrance exam test and all the other stuff that you need to do to be a good applicant. So so my application would not have been good enough to apply for medicine. And so at the moment, my thinking process was I should apply to something that is very close to medicine, or as close to medicine as possible. And the most logical choice at the moment was biomedical science. And to answer your second question, Nick, about the differences and similarities between the two courses is um, they're very similar in terms of what you study. So in both biomedical science and medicine, you study the diseases and the pathophysiology of the disease, so like how the disease comes around. However, in biomedical science, you study the disease in much more detail. You study the disease in a molecular level. So you study the protein to protein interactions and protein to like gene interactions and stuff in a much more detail that you won't do in medicine. However, medicine is different in that it focuses more on the clinical aspect of the diseases. So like how it affects the patients. So stuff like symptoms and the clinical signs, stuff like that is much more emphasized in medicine. Um, there's other stuff that you study as well, such as investigation, diagnosis, and management, which is not covered at all in biomedicine. Um, so those are the main differences. And once so in medicine, you focus much more on the management part of the disease. You focus on the ideas, concerns, and expectations of the patients, which obviously in biomedicine is not as relevant because you don't have that sort of clinical contact with patients as you do in medicine. So those are the main sort of broad differences. But in terms of the actual science part, it's very similar, both biomedicine and medicine.
Okay, so it's it's sort of like you got the research part of the medical industry and studying diseases, studying the illnesses, and then you have an aspect focusing, like for medicine, you're focusing on patient care, patient well-being, and patient management overall. Is that the is that a correct diagnosis?
Yes, you're absolutely right. So biomedicine focuses on the research that the medical guys or the clinicians use to improve patient care. However, it's also important to realize that you've got researchers in biomedicine, but you've also got um, biomedical scientists that work in the lab in hospitals as well. And these guys are equally as important in patient management and patient diagnosis and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there's two aspects of biomedicine. You've got the research aspect, but you've also got the clinical aspect here. The guys that work in the labs, making the diagnosis and all of that.
Okay. Okay. So you said, let's bring it back to the application process for medical school.
Hmm.
Because as you know, you've written for our magazine, but it's purely a medical magazine, and we're trying to explore the different aspects of the application process to go into medicine. So you said your application was
Hmm.
you decided very, very late on that you wanted to go into medicine, and you didn't have the right amount of work experience, volunteer work, and your grades and all that. It wasn't up to the industry standard. So what talk us through the application process. What were the challenges and the weaknesses, and what surprised you about the application process in general for medical?
Hmm. So the application process will be different, will be slightly different depending on the stage of life you're in. So if you're an 18-year-old, the application process will be slightly different to the stage where I was in as a grad student. or if you're a mature student, again, it will be slightly different. So as an 18-year-old, your GCSE grades are really important. Your A-level grades are really important. Your entry exams are really important. And finally, your interview, which is the last stage before you get your offer, that is very important as well. For me, as a grad student, GCSE grades were not as important. However, it was still important to like pass your GCSE English and your GCSE Maths and Science. However, GCSE grades were not as important for me, and A level grades were important, and obviously your entrance exams and your interview as well. In terms of work experience is just really important. Whether you're applying as an 18-year-old or if you're applying as a grad student or even as a mature student. And to answer your second question about there being difficulties in terms of getting the relevant experience and all of that. It can be very difficult to get relevant clinical experience, which is useful for medicine application. So some of the relevant experiences that you can get will be shadowing a GP or shadowing a doctor in a ward setting, or volunteering in care homes, or if you can, like working in a care home. So stuff like that would be like really useful clinical experience, not just to like write down on your CV, but also to get like a better picture of what medicine entails and like what doctors really do. So getting that sort of experience can be really difficult, and it can be helpful if you know someone within the medical field that can get you that experience. But there's a bit of luck as well. You can apply to like lots of different places, and hopefully someone replies back to you. However, yes, it can be very difficult to get those relevant experience to apply for to make yourself a really good candidate.
Right. I mean, is it like GPs are sending like job adverts on LinkedIn, or are you like spam emailing your local GP, or how does I mean, obviously it would be different for each individual person, but from your experience, how did you get your work experience?
So my work experience as an 18-year-old, I had none because I decided to do medicine a bit too late. So I had zero like relevant work experience, which at the time was obviously very like soul crushing, because I wanted to apply for medicine, but I don't have the relevant experience or like the grades that I need. But once I started studying biomedical science, and in my first and second years, when I had time, I would I signed up to volunteer in a care home. I worked part-time as a healthcare assistant, and I also worked part-time as a language interpreter at a hospital. So all of these experiences were really useful. Not just to write down on your CV, but also to talk about in the interview stage, and also to get like a better overall picture of what the field encompasses.
Did you feel prepared when you're signing up to these work experiences, or the language interpreter and the healthcare assistant? Did you think you were prepared, or were you overwhelmed? What were your initial thoughts when you were going into? Because these are quite intense situations and environments for a person who's just at the beginning of their medical career. This can be quite intimidating.
It's absolutely very much intimidating, especially. I still remember working as going to my first shift as a healthcare assistant. It was very nerve-wracking, because as a healthcare assistant, you're quite intimate with the patients, who are very, very vulnerable, and it's very difficult to sort of ground yourself to that level and try and help them. And it was something that obviously I wasn't used to, and it was something that I wasn't like around. So it takes time. It takes time to get comfortable. It takes time to sort of just get yourself going. However, just at the start, it's very nerve-wracking. All of these, trying to get all these relevant experiences.
thank you guys for listening to the North Wing Pound, watching and listening. Sorry, we're both on Spotify and YouTube, for anybody who's listening, watching. But yeah, thank you to listen, subscribe, like, and we'll see you guys in a bit.